Have you ever wondered why women's faces in old photographs of luxurious mansions so often express deep, frozen sadness? We are accustomed to admiring the glamour of the Gilded Age, the rustle of silk and the sparkle of diamonds, but we rarely look behind the heavy velvet curtains that hid the true lives of their owners. Behind the majestic facades of respectable houses, quiet tragedies unfolded that were not to be spoken of aloud, even with those closest to them. It was an era when a woman could possess the whole world within the walls of her home, but at the same time slowly disappear as a personality, dissolving into the stifling air of the drawing rooms. Wealth did not bring freedom, but rather imposed heavy shackles of obligation, turning a living person into a beautiful but silent function. History knows many examples of brilliant socialites fading away from an inexplicable melancholy, which doctors of the time simply called nerves. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the golden cage broke the will of the strongest women of their time, and what a terrible price they paid for their outward prosperity. What if I told you that the very layout of these magnificent homes was designed not for comfort, but for isolation? The huge mansions of the Gilded Age were designed to separate their inhabitants and create insurmountable barriers even within the same family. The women's quarters were often located far from the business offices and noisy halls, creating a feeling of voluntary confinement. Long corridors lined with carpets absorbed the sound of footsteps, creating an unnatural, oppressive silence that rang in the ears. The rooms were so huge that a person in them seemed small and insignificant, lost among the massive furniture and high ceilings. In these interiors, designed to demonstrate grandeur and status, there was absolutely no room for personal, intimate space where one could be oneself. The boudoir, considered the personal territory of the mistress of the house, was in fact a thoroughfare for maids, seamstresses, and visitors. Doors in these houses were rarely locked, symbolizing that a woman could have no secrets from her husband or society. She was always in plain sight, always under supervision, like a rare exhibit in a museum display case. Even the windows were often covered with thick, multi-layered curtains to protect the expensive upholstery from fading, plunging the rooms into perpetual semi-darkness. The silence in these houses was of a special kind. It was not the peaceful silence of tranquility, but the tense silence of anticipation. Women listened for hours to the sounds of the house, trying to guess their husband's mood from the sound of his footsteps or the slamming of a door. Any loud sound, laughter, or emotional outburst was considered vulgar and unacceptable in decent society. Emotions had to be suppressed, hidden deep inside, so as not to disturb the perfect smoothness of social existence. This constant restraint led to enormous internal tension that found no outlet. In such conditions, the feeling of loneliness became not just a mood, but a physically palpable state. A woman could be surrounded by dozens of servants, receive hundreds of guests, but at the same time not have a single living soul with whom she could talk sincerely. Conversations with servants were discouraged and strictly regulated, and communication with equals was reduced to an exchange of pleasantries. True feelings and experiences remained locked inside, finding no audience. It was isolation in a crowd, loneliness in full view of everyone, which made it even more painful and hopeless. Evenings were often spent apart. The men would go to smoking rooms or clubs, while the women remained in the drawing rooms. Over time, this physical distance grew into an insurmountable chasm of alienation. The woman remained alone in her luxurious bedroom, surrounded by cold beauty that could not warm her. I would be very interested to hear your point of view. How would you feel in such a space? What do you think about paying such a price for external comfort? Write about it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the rest of this story. Are you ready to learn the truth about what was hidden behind the impeccable manners of the ladies of that era? The life of a woman from high society was scheduled not by the hour, but by the minute, and this schedule was not made by her. From the early morning, she was forced into a rigid corset of obligations that was much tighter and more painful than the whalebone corset around her waist. Every action, every glance, every turn of the head was governed by a complex set of unwritten rules of etiquette. A step to the left or right was considered not just a mistake, but a fall that could destroy the reputation of the entire family. The morning did not begin with a joyful awakening, but with preparations to go on stage in her own life. Getting dressed took hours. A complicated hairstyle, multiple layers of clothing, choosing jewelry. All of this required enormous effort and patience. A woman could not just throw on a robe and drink coffee. She had to be impeccable even at breakfast with her husband. This constant need to keep up appearances was more exhausting than any physical labor. She never belonged to herself. Her body and her appearance were a showcase of her husband's wealth. Dinner parties and balls, which from the outside seemed like the height of leisure and fun, were a particular challenge. In reality, it was hard work, requiring her to remember countless details about the seating arrangements, the menu, and topics of conversation. A mistake in seating arrangements could lead to serious conflict and resentment that would be remembered for decades. The hostess was under tremendous stress all evening, making sure that everything went perfectly. Behind the glitter of crystal and silverware lay tense nerves and the fear of making a mistake. A woman's movements outside the home were also strictly limited. She could not simply go for a walk alone. She always had to be accompanied by a companion, a maid, or a relative. Otherwise, it would cast a shadow on her reputation. The pressure from the older women in the family, mothers, mothers-in-law, aunts, was perhaps the most difficult. They were the main guardians of tradition, watching every step a young woman took. Instead of support and understanding, she often encountered criticism and lectures about duty and humility. Female solidarity was replaced by mutual control, where each woman was a supervisor for the other. The circle was closed, leaving no room for freedom. But the worst happened when this ideal mask began to crack and the woman tried to seek help. In the next chapter, you will learn how the medicine of the time, instead of healing, completely destroyed women's destinies, turning anguish into a diagnosis. Want to know the secret that turned thousands of healthy women into lifelong patients? At the end of the 19th century, medicine, which was almost exclusively in male hands, created a convenient tool for controlling women's minds: the diagnosis of neurasthenia. Any deviation from the norm, sadness, irritability, a desire to engage in intellectual work, or simply fatigue from social life, was interpreted as an illness. The female body was considered inherently weak, unstable, and prone to hysteria. Instead of looking for the causes in the stifling atmosphere of prohibitions, doctors declared the very nature of women to be a pathology requiring correction. The most popular and cruel method of treatment was the so-called rest cure, developed by Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell. The essence of the method was to completely isolate the patient and absolutely prohibit any activity. The woman was confined to bed for several weeks and sometimes months and was not allowed to get up even to eat. She was not allowed to read, write, sew, or even engage in long conversations. It was believed that any mental activity depleted a woman's already weak supply of nervous energy. A woman's complaints of boredom and melancholy were perceived as the whims of a sick mind, not worthy of attention. The wall of misunderstanding between spouses became thicker and more insurmountable. The woman found herself in complete isolation, where even those closest to her acted against her. Such methods of treatment also had a hidden social function. They eliminated inconvenient women, those who asked too many questions, who wanted to study or work, who did not want to settle for the role of a beautiful decoration. Declaring a rebel mentally ill and locking her in her bedroom was the easiest way to restore order in the house. Medical diagnosis became a tool for suppressing dissent and preserving the patriarchal order. The consequences of such treatment remained with the woman for the rest of her life. Even after her release from confinement, she was afraid to show any initiative, fearing a relapse and a new imprisonment. She learned to be quiet, convenient, and inconspicuous, suppressing any lively impulses within herself. Fear of the doctor and his prescriptions became a constant backdrop to her existence. Her broken will could no longer resist the pressure of her environment. I would be very interested to hear your point of view. Have you encountered descriptions of similar conditions in literature? Like this post if this topic resonates with you and you think it is important for understanding women's history. What if I told you that the most luxurious weddings of the time were not celebrations of love, but cynical business deals? In a world of big money and old titles, marriage was seen as a merger of capital, where the feelings of young people came last. From an early age, girls were prepared for the fact that their main task was to marry profitably, raising the status of their family, or improving its financial situation. They grew up with the awareness that they were a valuable commodity that needed to be properly packaged and sold at a high price. Romantic dreams were cruelly shattered on the granite rocks of parental pragmatism. A particularly striking phenomenon was the so-called dollar princesses, wealthy American heiresses who were married off to impoverished European aristocrats. Parents bought their daughters the title of duchess or countess, and their sons-in-law received millions to renovate their ancestral castles. The girl was simply exchanged for a coat of arms and social status, often without even asking her opinion. She was transported across the ocean to a foreign country, to a cold, damp castle, to a husband who often saw her only as a money bag. The courtship period was short and strictly regulated, leaving no opportunity to truly get to know one's future spouse. Young people met only in the presence of witnesses, at balls or dinner parties, where everyone wore a mask of propriety. The bride could only guess at her fiancé's character, habits, and vices. Often her husband's true face was revealed to her only after the wedding, when there was no turning back. It was a lottery in which the stakes were incredibly high, a whole life. Divorce at that time was a terrible stigma, a disgrace that left an indelible mark on a woman. Even if the husband was a monster, society condemned the wife who decided to destroy the family. A divorced woman became an outcast, no longer welcome in respectable homes. Therefore, most chose to endure, creating a facade of well-being that hid hellish torment. Life turned into an endless game for the public. Marriage became not a union of two hearts, but a golden cage with the most reliable lock. The key to this lock was thrown away on the wedding day, and the woman remained locked up alone with her happiness, which was envied by everyone around her. Outward success hid a deep inner tragedy. Do you think there was any chance for real happiness in such conditions? Or did the exceptions only prove the rule? In the next chapter, you will learn how things began to replace people and why expensive collections became the jailers of their owners. The interiors of the Victorian and Gilded Age were famous for their overload of detail. Rooms were literally crammed with furniture, carpets, curtains, statuettes, vases, and paintings. Empty space was considered a sign of poverty or lack of taste. But for the woman who lived amid all this splendor, objects became not decorations of life, but its dictators. Each item required care, attention, and space, gradually crowding out air and light from the rooms. The lady of the house was the chief guardian of this material universe. Although the heavy work of cleaning was done by servants, the responsibility for the preservation of the collections lay with her. She had to know the history of every porcelain shepherdess, make sure that the velvet did not fade and the silver shone. Her mind was occupied with endless inventorying of property and material concerns that left no room for the spiritual. Things became more important than people, and their preservation was placed above the comfort of the inhabitants of the house. The abundance of fragile objects dictated her manner of behavior. She had to move carefully, smoothly, so as not to touch or break anything. Even the woman's physicality was subordinated to the space cluttered with things. In her own home, she could not run, make sudden movements, or breathe freely. The space disciplined the body no less than a corset. She maneuvered between tables and shelves like a ship in dangerous waters. When a woman died, her belongings remained. They outlived their owners, retaining their shine and beauty, indifferent to the fate of those who had cherished them. The inventory of property was often longer and more detailed than the obituary. Things won this silent war, remaining the eternal masters of the mansions. Ultimately, luxury became a burden, gold dust clogging the lungs, preventing them from breathing deeply. Wealth, meant to give freedom and opportunity, turned into dependence on inanimate objects. Women became appendages to their homes, guardians of a museum of their own lack of freedom. Guess what happened to the woman when the guests left and the doors of the mansion closed for the night? At that moment, the most frightening part of her existence began. an encounter with herself, or rather, with the emptiness that remained of her personality. Years of pretense, suppression of emotions, and following other people's rules did not pass without a trace. Her personality was erased, like a picture on an old coin is erased from constant circulation. The woman ceased to understand where the role she played ended and where she herself began. She looked in the mirror and saw impeccable hair, expensive jewelry, and a calm face, but she did not recognize the gaze. Her eyes were filled with the very melancholy that poets sang about, but which in reality was a sign of deep inner depression. She forgot what she had dreamed of in her youth, what she had loved, what she had wanted to devote her life to. Her desires atrophied from disuse, like the muscles of a bedridden patient. Only her function remained: wife, mother, hostess, her husband's calling card. Many began to keep secret diaries, confiding to paper what could not be said aloud. These entries are striking documents of the era, full of pain, despair, and silent pleas for understanding. In them, we see living, suffering people locked in icy palaces. But even in their diaries, they often subjected themselves to self-censorship, fearing that someone would read and condemn them. The internal censor worked flawlessly. The gradual disappearance of personality led to a state similar to a waking dream. The days merged into a gray, monotonous ribbon, where one event was indistinguishable from another. Time lost its meaning, turning into a viscous substance. A woman simply was present in her life without participating in it. It was a slow extinction, invisible to those around her, but painful for the victim herself. The disappearance of the I is the most terrible tragedy of the Gilded Age. Not the loss of money or status, but the loss of one's very human essence. Women who had everything actually had nothing because they did not have themselves. Their souls slowly dissolved into luxurious interiors, becoming part of history but ceasing to be part of life. How do you think these women felt when they were alone with themselves in complete silence? But perhaps they had a way of expressing their pain without words? In the next chapter, you will learn why music and flowers became the only language in which they were allowed to speak the truth. In a world where words were constrained by etiquette and direct complaints were considered a sign of weakness, emotions sought other outlets. Women, deprived of a voice in their own destiny, learned to sublimate their pain and longing into acceptable forms. Music became one of the main channels for expressing the unspoken. The hours spent at the piano were not just exercise or entertainment. They were a cry from the soul, clothed in notes. Playing Chopin or Schumann, a woman could allow herself the passion and tragedy that were forbidden in real life. The keys became the only interlocutors who understood and did not judge. Embroidery, seemingly the most humble and quiet of pursuits, also became a form of meditation and escape from reality. The monotonous movements of the needle helped calm the nerves, and the intricate patterns became encrypted messages. Each stitch could hide an unshed tear or suppressed anger. Women wove their thoughts into tapestries and napkins, creating beauty from their own pain. These handicrafts were preserved for centuries, but no one could read the true story imprinted in them. Letters to friends and relatives were another outlet, although caution had to be exercised there as well. Women developed a special Aesopian language that allowed them to hint at their experiences without naming things directly. Between the lines about the weather and fashion, one could read deep longing and loneliness. The ability to read the subtext was an important skill in female friendships at that time. They supported each other with subtle hints, creating an invisible network of solidarity. Sadness was often disguised as religiosity. Earnest prayers, church attendance, and charity provided a legitimate outlet for emotional energy. Turning to God was the only way to complain to a higher authority about one's lot in life without fear of condemnation. Religion offered comfort and meaning in suffering, promising a reward in heaven for patience on earth. For many, it was the only straw holding them back from the abyss of despair. The mansions were filled with this heavy, thick atmosphere of unexpressed feelings. It hung in the air, permeated the walls, settled as dust on the furniture. Sensitive souls felt it physically, suffocating in the luxurious halls. It was a house full of ghosts of living people who did not dare to speak. History has preserved their portraits, their dresses, their jewels, but not their voices. We can only guess at the storms that raged in their hearts. But when we look closely at their faces in old photographs, we see the mark of a deep, hidden sadness that speaks louder than any words. The only place where a woman could feel relative freedom and control was often the garden or greenhouse. Plants were living creatures that depended on her care, but did not require etiquette or condemnation. In working with the earth and flowers, ladies found the connection to nature and reality that they lacked in the artificial world of salons. Greenhouses became secret sanctuaries where one could breathe different air, moist, warm, smelling of earth and life, rather than dust and wax. A passion for botany and gardening was one of the few female hobbies approved by society. It was believed that this activity was ennobling and suited to the gentle female nature. But for the women themselves, it was more than just a hobby. It was an opportunity to create, to see the real fruits of their labor, to observe the cycle of life and death, which was real, not stage. Flowers bloomed not according to the rules of light, but according to the laws of nature. And this was mesmerizing. However, there were limitations here as well. The garden also had to be decent, well-groomed, and subject to a regular style. The exuberance of wild nature was not allowed. Women, in essence, did the same thing that was done to them. They pruned, shaped, and forced things to grow within the necessary boundaries. The metaphor was obvious but rarely recognized. They created perfect order out of the chaos of nature, projecting onto the garden the desire for harmony in their own souls. Winter gardens and greenhouses were especially important during the cold season. When the world outside froze and turned gray, eternal summer remained inside the glass walls. It was a refuge from harsh reality, a fairy tale world created with one's own hands. There, among the palm trees and orchids, one could dream of distant lands and freedom, of a life that could have been completely different. The greenhouse was a capsule of life in the dead season. Flowers often became the only recipients of tenderness that had no one else to pour out on. Women talked to them, touched their petals with a reverence that was inappropriate in relationships with people. The plants responded to the care with growth and flowering, and it was an honest, simple return. In a world of fake smiles and selfish interests, the honesty of a flower was priceless. Ultimately, the garden was not just a piece of land, but a projection of its owner's soul. Neglected or perfectly manicured, austere or romantic, it said more about her than she herself could ever say. It was a green mirror reflecting the secret life of a woman hidden behind the high walls of a respectable house. The period of mourning and widowhood was a special stage in the life of a woman of that era, paradoxically combining deep grief and long-awaited freedom. When her husband died, a woman would don heavy black clothes, which seemed to symbolize the final point in her confinement. Mourning etiquette was incredibly strict. Certain fabrics, no jewelry, and a ban on social entertainment for many years. It seemed as if the cage was closing even tighter, plunging the world into darkness. Women became living monuments to their departed spouses, deprived of the right to color and joy. However, it was precisely by becoming a widow that a woman often gained legal and financial independence for the first time in her life. If her husband left her an estate and the right to dispose of it, she suddenly gained power she could never have dreamed of. She no longer had to ask permission to spend money, report on her every move, or adapt to someone else's mood. The black veil that hid her face not only protected her from prying eyes, but also allowed her to look at the world directly, without looking over a man's shoulder. Relationships with children often became the only meaning of existence. The widow transferred all her unspent energy and control to her sons and daughters. From a victim, she often turned into a domestic tyrant, demanding the same self-sacrifice from her children that she herself had made. She kept them close, manipulating their sense of duty and guilt, afraid of being left alone in an empty house. Love became suffocating. Old age in a huge mansion full of memories was majestic and sad. The rooms where music once played were now closed, the furniture covered with dust covers. The woman wandered around the house like the keeper of a museum of her own life, sorting through old letters and photographs. The past became more real than the present. She was less interested in living people than in the ghosts of a bygone era. Social death often came before physical death. The widow gradually fell out of the circle of communication. She was forgotten to be invited. She was remembered only on holidays. She became a living relic, a symbol of bygone times, incomprehensible and unnecessary to the new generation. The world was changing outside her windows. Cars and telephones appeared. Fashions changed. But in her house, time stood still forever. She remained faithful to the era that had created and destroyed her. And yet there was a certain grandeur in this final chapter of her life. Having survived, having gone through all the trials, having retained her dignity, she inspired awe. Her face, furrowed with wrinkles, bore the traces of all the dramas she had lived through. It was the tragic beauty of ruins, of a majestic sunset. As she departed, she took with her the secrets of an entire generation. Stories of unfulfilled hopes, of love that never happened, of pain that had become familiar. Her widow's garments were the final curtain falling on the stage of her life, hiding from the audience the finale of a play in which she never got the leading role. Looking back on this era of glamour and tragedy, we see not just beautiful pictures, but a complex mosaic of human destinies. The women who lived in the golden cages of respectable homes left us a legacy that cannot be measured in money or antiques. It is a legacy of silence that breaks through the centuries, a lesson that human dignity and happiness cannot be bought with all the gold in the world. Their stories serve as a warning about the danger of dissolving into the expectations of others and losing oneself for the sake of outward glamour. Today, when we talk about women's rights, self-fulfillment, and psychological health, we are, in essence, engaging in a dialogue with those who were deprived of these things. We are saying what they kept silent about, finishing what they were forbidden to do. Their invisible presence is felt in every step we take toward freedom. We are their voices which have finally been heard in full force. The history of the Gilded Age teaches us to see the person behind the facade, to feel the pain of others behind the beautiful picture. It reminds us that the true value of life is not in things, but in the opportunity to be yourself, to love whom you want, and to do what your heart desires. It is a simple lesson, but one that has been learned through generations of suffering. May the memory of the women who slowly disappeared inside respectable houses not disappear completely. May their fates not be forgotten, but become part of our shared history. After all, by understanding the past, we learn to appreciate the present and build a future in which the golden cage remains only a museum exhibit, not a place to live. We close this book of destinies, but the questions it raises remain with us. About free will, about the price of compromise, about the search for happiness, and perhaps somewhere in the silence of an old park or in the reflection of a mirror, we can still catch the farewell, sad glance of a beautiful lady from the last century who has finally found peace. This was a story not about things, but about souls, about the fragility of the human psyche and the incredible power of female endurance. May it serve as a reminder of how important it is to cherish our inner light, even when darkness thickens around us. The story of these women forces us to take a fresh look at familiar images of the past and think about what really lies behind the facades of prosperity. We have seen how luxury can become a prison and social status a heavy burden. How did this story make you feel? Sympathy, surprise, or perhaps sadness? Write in the comments what other hidden aspects of famous historical eras you would like to learn about in future videos. And be sure to subscribe to the channel to continue this journey into history with us.